welcome, Elaine, and thank you for offering to speak to us today. I know that when I met you, we were talking about the Education and Training Foundation, but you're the Director of SEND Support and Nursery at City College, Norwich. Thank you very much. If you'd like to bring up your slides, Elaine, and introduce yourself.
Will do. Hello, everyone. I feel an absolute privilege to be here today. So thank you for the invitation. And I always love Hugh's passion and how he sets the scene for today. I will just go straight on to share my slides, if I may. So hopefully you can see those, and I'll just take myself off camera if that's okay. So as Alice has just said, I'm one of the 3 Centres for Excellence in SEND through the Education Training Foundation, but I'm also Director of SEND Support and Nursery at City College, Norwich. And I'm very proud to say that we gained outstanding in our recent inspection for high need students. Today we're going to be talking about the role of colleges in supporting employment. And what I do want to say first and foremost, that through the Education Training Foundation, we have been working for the last 3 years with the further education college sector on a step change with SEND. However, many people have gotten board with us, and we've got an excellent community that we work with. So we're working with local authorities, different with training providers, because we're all here, and you're all here committed today because we want that change, and we have seen a huge significant step change within the sector already. I've got a couple of links in there for you to have a look at afterwards, and I know the slides will be shared afterwards, so you'll be able to have a good look here. There is some top tips. There's, sharing effective practice, and also current webinars where we're looking at themes. And then each of the 3 colleges that you can see down there on the left hand side are leading on different areas. But you can contact them and indeed myself at any point when you've got something really specific you want to unpack, because it's a safe place, and it's somewhere where we're able to say, well, let's unpack this together and see how we can move things forward, because we're here to make a difference. So Western lead on people, so that's about staff development. Derby lead on curriculum, self-explanatory. Mine's a little bit more confusing, but I lead on mostly working with employers, parent carers and the local authority. And then, of course, I think what I really heard here today already, and I expect we'll hear a little bit more about that, is around a cultural change. And that's something that we've been really focusing on, because we all as practitioners can be beavering away, but actually you do need that cultural change and the leaders to be leading SEND inclusion for greater outcomes. And so part of what we do through Education Training Foundation is to make sure that leaders are sharing their effective practice. And so you can have those conversations with each of the leaders from the colleges. Confidential, it's an open, safe space, but actually it's just how do you do this? What challenges are you being presented with? So that's been really effective over the last 3 years. Moving on, I just want to really focus on some of the data and stats. Now, Hugh's talked about a much bleaker picture, and I'm sure it is really bleak. I think depending on which set of data that you look at, it's really bleak. And then that's what gets me out of bed every day. And I know that's why, you're all here today, because we want to make that change. What we do know is that there's a downward trend in paid employment. We've got some really good practice within Norwich that I want to share with you, and I am seeing that across the sector, where colleges are talking to us about actually what is it that you do, and please can you share your models so that we can look to replicate those, and we have ongoing support throughout the college. So do get in touch with us if you feel that you need to have those discussions. But we know that there's a SEND review that Hugh noted just a moment ago, and we know that preparation is a key focus, and then we need to make sure that every stage, right from the earliest years, needs to be in place. For me, that's actually is an outcome framework that prepares everyone from adulthood from the earliest stage. Why aren't we thinking about our young people's aspirations right from a very early age, and just thinking about that, which includes, you know, what are their plans for employment much further on, but let's not shy away from that. We know that there needs to be a greater transition from every single step from school, college to employment. And within our community, within Norfolk, we're working really hard to make sure that we've got really good partners, really good connections, so that learners at the heart of it have a really good experience. When I'm actually thinking that we really do, and I'm still, whilst outstanding, having a huge focus still on making sure that we improve our outcomes for our SEND learners. We need to make sure that we're still making sure that we're developing their skills, not only for independence, but actually supporting those through to employment. So when we're talking to the sector, we're not saying we know it all, and we're still on a journey, and there's always something that you can improve on and to do much better, especially when you look at those stats there. And we all know that there are so many vacancies out there, even within, when I look at my college with the vacancies that are available, you know, what is it that I need to do when I'm looking at encouraging my workforce, even within my team, to be diverse, and actually thinking about people that I need to train. What is it that I need to take responsibility as an employer, and then as a training provider within my community? Our focus, and the focus of my slides today, is around focusing on those with learning disabilities into paid employment. And I want to just sort of take an approach about how we go about that. So of course, within, and when I'm thinking about all of my learners within our college, and our high needs spans all levels and all ability, all levels, and across all sector areas. For this and for this presentation, I am focusing primarily on those that entry level and those that are looking to go into employment for today. But of course, we're focusing all of the time on all of the PFAL areas. And what we really do think about, and I did a lot of work on this a few years ago, is to really unpack our pathways, and I'm going to give you a little bit more detail about that in a moment, so that we were really clear from the entry point of speaking to our learners, even when we were talking to them when they came around and had a look at the college, what they'd learnt before, what have they done before, what are their interests, and actually talk to them and their parents about their pathway plan. Picking up on Hugh's point, you know, making sure that the parents are on board, that the learners are really clear about, and to get excited about what their aspirations are. Which brings me on to that next point, that we're not just shoehorning them into something that they might not want to actually work long time, because it is about longevity, it's about happiness, it's about them, you know, their health and well-being. So making sure that we're listening and understanding what their aspirations are. And of course, within that, we work really hard to personalise that, and I'll come on to that in just a moment. And that's a really a key part in what we do. All along the way, the pathway plan, we know that we're developing those skills, and I think some of the work that we've done over the course of the years is to add further programs, and I'll come on to that in a moment, because we needed to develop our learner skills a little bit more because they weren't quite ready for employment. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. Transition between next steps is absolutely key, and to make sure that learners are aware from it right from the start, but actually have got really good good support and to be able to help them with their next steps. And one of the things that I deliberately did a few years ago that's been really successful at a certain point, which you'll see in a moment, is that we took away additional learning support because we wanted to give greater independence. We prepared the learners for that, but actually we then put in a job coach. So they still had the support, but they got used to something that was quite different. And so transition can mean lots of different things. And so that's for each organisation to unpack and to think, actually, what do I need and how do I need to resource that to make sure it's successful? And of course, ultimately, we're thinking about progression right through to employment. So let's unpack that a little bit. Within my role and what I actually do, and working with the other two colleges when I talked about Darby's work within the curriculum. This is Darby's, Darby, if you've seen any of Sarah's presentations, she talks about her 8Ps. So I've taken her 8Ps and I felt quite pleased with myself that the next part that actually looks like peas, doesn't it, everyone? But you know, when I'm thinking about it in the work that we do, and if you're not aware of how we follow Ofsted in the Common Inspection Framework, we have to look at the intent of what we're doing, the implementation and impact. So the intent part of it, when we're thinking about why are we doing what we're doing, so that's absolutely critical in responding to our community. And so if there's any colleges out there that needs to do some further development and thinking, are we meeting the needs of our community, then you've got to think about what you're planning and what your curriculum's like. Then you need to think about how you're going to implement that, because at the end of it, it's your impact. That's your journey at the end. And for this purpose, it's sustainable employment. And one of the when we're looking at the 3 I's as well as the 8 P's, there's the inclusion part, which is absolutely critical in what we do, so that everyone has an opportunity and chance to be successful. And picking up on a parent's comment a little while ago, and I know we're going to unpack that in Q&A about those about her NEET young person, that's something for us. We have community responsibility to be able to ensure that we've got a successful outcome. So we put on specific programs around that. So that comes onto my purpose. And then we prioritize what we have to do. We make sure that we've got the right people in place. And that might be partners, that might be skilled, trained staff. So we're thinking about all of that on our journey, making sure that parent carers are on board and understand the journey, and the places around the right resources, and how we're taking that forward. So that's absolutely really important. And I am going to come on to place in a little while and to give some examples of that. Of course, you've heard me talk about pathways and how we personalise that, a little bit more detail in just a moment, as well as the progression and the performance for us. And in this set of circumstances, and Hugh is quite right to point out, what's the outcome? Are we getting people in sustainable employment, and are we monitoring and tracking that? And I feel very proud that we actually do that, and we keep in touch and track with our community through our job coaches, and of course we'll come back to employers around that as well. For us, we have a culture of this, and I would urge any of you to think about this approach. What works well? How might we an even better if? Because this is how when I think about our principal, how she sets us up to think, to be able to say, well, actually things are working well, but there might be some things that might not be quite right. So what have you got to do about it? And if you can take that approach, then you can make adjustments and to think, well, actually, it's not quite working. And rather than a negative deficit, you're taking about an even better if approach. And I'll come into that and how we unpack that. So for me, an even better if, we had great attendance from our learner community when I first started working at the college. But actually, they were going round and round in the system, and they might come to us for a couple of years. They might go to another college for a couple of years, and we didn't have this pathway plan. So I stripped that back and actually said, what are we doing? So for that initial assessment, we created a pathway plan. And one was through, actually, when we're looking at our step 2 of our complex learners, because we're just giving them the skills to be as independent as possible. The other pathway plan was around, also that's the independent living pathway. The other one was around a vocational pathway, ultimately going through to employment or on to further mainstream courses, and then off to perhaps do A-levels with some of our learners, and then off to university. So it's a different route there for some of our learners. And another route was through supported work, so where they're learning a vocational pathway. So that's one of the simple ways of unpacking, you know, an even better if, and understanding how you can take that forward. So if I'm thinking about the last section on the employability pathway, I just want to unpack that. And I think, you know, Hugh talked about learner readiness. This is something that we do, and we do this every year, where we unpack this to say, is it working, and do we need to do something different? Because our learner community changes, and we've come out of a pandemic, so we think, well, have we got to put some further stepping stones in, or have we got to do something else with our catch-up funding and things like that? When this was designed, we put some further inserts here, which I'll come into in just a moment. So we had an employer pathway, we had a general enterprise, which was fundamentally learning about employability skills. So when we were talking to our learners, when we're looking at that initial assessment up there, we knew where our learners wanted to go. So we talked about a general enterprise course. That's where they're developing early skills on-site enterprise activities. They're learning about product preparation, customer services. So you've got your maths and English in there. They're building their confidence around the college with meeting people. That's all done on site. Then when we're looking to the next stage, they're actually going into a sector area. So they're actually looking at that. So they're developing their skills, honing those into a specific area, which they would have thought about in the general enterprise. So that's when we're talking about getting ready for their next steps. And this is the point where I took away the learning support, where we put in a job coach. Now, that's personalisation, so that might be slightly different for some learners. Some learners might fast track straight to a supported internship. That's been personalised. Some learners might take a little bit longer. That's really important. And for us, we need to be really clear about that, so we can support the learner, so that we can have good conversations with our local authority to be able to fund that. What we recognise, and it comes on to the point that Hugh was making a little while ago, some of our learners weren't quite ready. Some of them were able to go from our enterprise into a supported internship. Some of them weren't quite ready. So we then created, well, the learners called it Ticket, because it's a ticket to employment. And so that's where they were able to look at real jobs, searching for and to understand what jobs were actually available, and to understand what skills they needed to develop. Some of those learners from that point onwards actually develop really well and still develop really well and go straight into employment at that point. And so when we're looking at from Ticket further down, that's where we see our real successes here, because when we go back to the enterprise, that's off-site working with work experience. Ticket has some work experience, but they have some mock interviews. They will get employers in as well, because we've got great relations with our employers, and taking that forward. I'm going to start moving forward because I've got a lot more to cover, and I realise there's...
Yeah, just a couple more minutes, Elaine.
So we've got a supported internship and a supported employment agency. This is some of the work that we're talking with employers, but I am going to just talk very quickly here because this is really significant, and I do want to cover this if I may. We know that there's new guidance out there with our supported internship. It works absolutely exceptionally well. We know the sector is increasing in supported interns, and Hugh noted that, you know, we've got a further double in the amount, which was then the Department for Education has asked us to pull together a quality framework. We've been working with Hugh and Project Search to pull that together. So this framework will be here at the end of March. That's really great because that allows us to really quality assure and quality improve, and to support providers out there to make sure that you're on the right track and you're helping young people to get into supported interns. I'm going to finish off onto this model here. Please come back to me afterwards about this, please, because I'm run out of time. This is around our supported employment agency. We have great success rates with this. Even this last year, and you can see we've been running it for 12 years now. This last year, even in the pandemic, we had 47 learners gain permanent work or an apprenticeship as a result of the work that we do. Get in touch with me to talk about this model, or go on and have a look at the webinar there. The other work that we do is to work with our employers of apprentices, and we talk about an inclusive workplace. We have employer induction. We also have our own staff induction toolkit around disability as well. So there's some resources there for you as well. Lots of our employers that we work with, lots of our colleges that we work with, want to understand about how to set these up, these are some of the things we cover. Get in touch with us about that. We signpost an awful lot back to base, but that's something that you can pick up with us as well, and some links there. And breathe. Sorry, I wanted to make sure, there was so much I wanted to get in there. You can see I'm like you, I could talk forever, everyone.
Thank you, Elaine. I really appreciate the way that you've put lots of thought into the things that you've brought into that presentation, which is in itself a really useful resource, all those links. So thank you very much.